7 signs your self-reliance is actually a cognitive adaptation. Welcome to this explainer. If you clicked on this, chances are you're someone who would almost always rather do it yourself than risk asking anyone for help. You know exactly who you are, right? When a project gets incredibly tough, when life throws a massive curveball your way, or when you're just completely overwhelmed, your first instinct is never to look around for a hand. Nope. Your very first instinct is to double down, isolate, and figure the whole thing out on your own. It's a heavy way to live, but to you, it feels absolutely necessary, doesn't it? Well, let's dive into this, because what we're going to look at today completely changes the narrative around that instinct.
Society loves to give this behavior a really simple label. They call it just stubbornness. People might tell you that you're too rigid, that you have control issues, or that your hyper-independence is some kind of character flaw that you desperately need to fix. But the source material we're looking at today frames it entirely differently. They call it a survival strategy. What's really interesting here is how this completely shifts the blame. This hyper-independence you feel, it isn't a glitch in your personality. It's not mere stubbornness. It is a brilliant, deeply ingrained survival strategy that, at one point in your life, kept you completely safe.
Section 1. The Lone Architect, Facing the Massive Gap. To really understand this psychology, I want you to picture a stick figure standing entirely alone before a massive, intimidating gap in the ground. This gap represents any significant challenge, crisis, or need in your life. It's way too wide to jump. It requires a bridge. It requires resources. This right here is the starting point for our lone architect.
Section 2. When dependence feels risky, the wobbly hands. So, naturally, other figures appear beside our lone architect, offering to help them cross. But there is a crucial detail we need to look at. Their hands are wobbly. They're drawn with shaking, jagged, completely unreliable lines. To the hyper-independent person, this is exactly what outside help looks like. It's well-meaning, maybe, but ultimately it completely lacks the structural integrity you need when your actual safety's on the line.
Because of this, dependence felt risky. Notice it doesn't say dependence is risky for everyone, but for the lone architect, it felt risky. Think about it for a second. If you reach out and grab a wobbly hand while you're suspended over a massive gap, you aren't just risking a mild disappointment, you are risking a catastrophic fall. Taking that unreliable help isn't just frustrating. Relying on others actually registers in your brain as a massive unacceptable hazard.
Which brings up a really crucial question. Why does dependence feel so risky? Why does your brain look at a helping hand and immediately calculate a high probability of failure? To really understand the lone architect, we have to pause here. We need to pivot and look backward. Let's explore the root cause of why we learned to so vehemently reject unreliable help in the first place.
Section 3. The Childhood Blueprint, Where It Started. The answer to our question actually lies in the past. This intense self-reliance stems from childhoods that lacked reliable support, effectively teaching a child a very harsh lesson. You must handle challenges completely alone.
I want you to really absorb this core idea. Competence must be the default setting. This is just so profound. The brain learns from this early lack of reliable support that total self-competence isn't just a nice handy trait to have. It is literally the only safe baseline for existing in the world. Moving forward, the brain hardwires itself to bypass seeking help entirely because the historical data it collected during childhood proved over and over that external help fails. Therefore, unwavering internal competence absolutely must be the default setting.
Section 4. Internalized resourcefulness, the tool within. Let's return to our visual metaphor of the stick figure standing at the massive gap. Surrounded by all those wobbly hands offering unreliable help, the main figure makes a definitive choice. They reject the wobbly hands completely. Instead, in a striking visual turning point, the figure reaches up and pulls a tool directly out of their own head.
That wild visual represents internalized resourcefulness. Simply put, this means relying entirely on internal mental symbols and tools to solve problems when reliable external support is absent. Pulling the tool from the head symbolizes turning completely inward. You become your own primary caregiver. You become your own project manager. You become the whole shebang, your own entire support system. You learn to extract exactly what you need from your own intellect and willpower, simply because nothing outside of you can be trusted.
And that leads us directly to our second major definition, cognitive adaptation. This is a psychological survival mechanism developed to navigate environments lacking dependable help. I really want to reiterate this because it is the absolute core of our explainer today. This hyper-independence, this internalized resourcefulness we're talking about, is a true cognitive adaptation. It is a biological, psychological mechanism hardwired into your brain to keep you functioning in an environment that didn't support you. It's a feature of your survival, definitely not a bug in your personality.
Section 5. Crossing the bridge alone, execution plan. So we know the architect has the internal tool, and we know exactly why they have it. But how does this actually get put to use to cross the massive gap safely? Let's break down the exact sequence of events.
Here is the lone architect's exact execution plan. Step 1, face the massive gap. You have to confront the obstacle. Step 2, reject wobbly help, dismissing those unreliable external forces. Step 3, extract the internal tool, tapping into that deep internalized resourcefulness we just talked about. But step 4 is where the real magic happens. Build the bridge with solid lines. Notice the contrast here? The help from others was drawn with wobbly, shaking lines, but the architect's own work, it's built with straight, solid, unwavering lines. They engineer their own structural integrity. And finally, step 5, cross successfully.
And what happens once they finally reach the other side? A small nod to themselves. Think about that image for a second. The figure successfully crosses the bridge they built entirely alone. They stand on the other side of this massive gap. They don't celebrate with a crowd. They don't turn around and high-five the people who offered wobbly hands. They simply look back at the sturdy, solid bridge they constructed, and they give a triumphant, quiet, and yet fundamentally isolated small nod of recognition to themselves. They survived, once again, strictly because of their own competence.
Which brings us to the ultimate question to wrap up our explainer. Is your default setting for competence keeping you safe or just keeping you alone? It is undeniably a brilliant survival strategy, and those solid lines you've built have probably carried you over countless massive gaps in your life. But as you look at your own execution plan today, it's really worth asking, are you still surrounded by wobbly hands, or have you maybe just stopped checking to see if anyone else has learned how to draw a solid line? I want to leave you with that to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.